All right, so the first thing we're talking about tonight is what is called a swing gang or a swing crew. This stuff comes from nevadafilm.com. It is letter B in the syllabus underneath swing gang or swing crew. So swing gangs are typically part of the set decorating or set dressing department. It's a team of people that make any last minute changes on set. So they just quickly go up there and they might call, it's usually only on larger productions that have this. Otherwise it'll be like the just regular set dressers or set decorating crew that are already on set. But if it's a separate crew of people, a separate team, they'll come in and they'll be part of those crews so that they don't all have to work so many hours, so that they can split the hours in half and not have people working 19, 20, 24 hours, because the art department needs to constantly be getting ready for the next thing. So what they do is they come in, they'll do any last minute changes on set. Sometimes certain sets will have them on standby, and then they'll be like, we need to readjust a few things here, there, and then they'll tell them what they need. They'll quickly come in and they'll readjust those things. On other sets, they are used to do changes before the set is needed, but it's maybe like overnight before the next day and things like that. So much of the swing gang's crew, their work might occur overnight when the shooting is not on site. That way they're doing the last minute, well, quote unquote, last minute changes before the set is needed the next day. And so they'll be the ones to do it overnight so that the rest of the team, the rest of the art department, set dressing and set decorating crew can rest to be ready for the next day instead of trying to work, like I said, 24/7. They are usually directed by what is called the lead man or leadman, responsible for moving furniture, dressing props, and other set decoration on and off set. Swing gangs are like movers. They work fast, lift heavy things. They work efficiently, safely, and without damaging anything. The lead man keeps track of inventory of all the props and decorations needed for each scene. A set that is not meant to be permanent is what is called a swing set, and are constructed and removed as the script calls for. And sometimes the swing gang will be over that set, so they'll be the ones to set it up really quickly, get it ready for a shot or two, maybe a pickup, and then they'll be the ones to break it all down while the rest of the crew works on something else. So they're basically just another art department crew that either come in before shooting to set up or after shooting to break down, so that the art department, the other members of the art department, don't have to work unending amounts of hours. They're not seen in every single set. It really depends, especially with the budget levels and everything like that. So on the professional sets, you might see them a lot more, where with like the biggest of budgets, whereas the small independent budgets, you definitely won't be seeing them. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Not really too much information on them. It's basically just an extension of the same things we've been talking about: set decorating, set dressing. They may be given those titles and used as a swing gang and just not called that, or they may be given that designated like title of this crew is, separate for this reason, for this purpose.
Isn't part of their responsibility to catch things like Starbucks coffee cups in the background and whatnot?
For continuity, they might. I didn't see anything about that for them. I mean, all art department is kind of over that stuff, so I would say probably. Depends on when they come in, really. If they're used as like a, do this stuff tonight while we all go to sleep so we can wake up and be here in the morning, then no, they would try to catch that stuff, but they wouldn't really be on set during the time of shooting. If they're used as like literally last minute changes, then yeah, I feel like it would be partially over them, as well as continuity, of course.
No, but there is a possibility that they would be able to get out of that with, if something does happen, it wouldn't fall back on them directly, depending on when they came. But
Yeah, depending on like that, I would say because they're the ones that either set it up or break it down, it's not a hot set yet. So they can't really get in trouble for moving stuff around or leaving something. But
yeah,
yeah, yeah, like with the Game of Thrones coffee cup thing, I don't know who would be responsible for that besides, obviously the script supervisor and whoever else is over continuity.
yeah.
All right, moving on from that, we're talking a bit about different deliverables that most people need, most distributors need when they are giving you a deal. And we're also talking about just different things to do with distribution. So the first thing isn't a deliverable, it's just something to be aware of. Ancillary rights. So this stuff comes from upcouncil.com and it is letter B in the syllabus. Ancillary rights are all rights that are related to exploiting property in ways different from the original format. So it's not just for films, it's used in other ways for other things, but for filmmakers especially, you want to be aware of this when you're doing any kind of distribution deal. For films, these rights include merchandise, sequels and prequels, TV show rights, plays that are based on the film or the world of the film, if it's a unique IP, any books that come out of it, soundtrack recordings, if a web series, comic books, graphic novels, and all of that kind of stuff. They are supplementary rights arising from the primary rights to the property. So the primary rights being the film itself, supplementary rights deriving from it being anything else that comes out of it, like merchandise and all of that, because it wouldn't be there without the film. If the film's based on a book or something, then really the ancillary rights belongs to whoever the owner of the author of the book is, because they can sell their rights for film to somebody, but keep comic book rights or keep other rights for themselves. So it has to be original, your original story, not based on someone else's work. And then you have all of the rights you have the primary and the ancillary rights to that project until you sell it away, if you do. So you want to be aware of if you're getting a good deal or not, because you don't just want to give away all the rights to your story if there could be, if you could make something out of it. Like if you're making a new world and you put a lot of years of thought into it and things like that, and you created this interesting world that people want to read about, they want to play a video game on based on it, those kind of things, then if you sold all those rights to the distributor has the rights to do the video games, do the books, and you're not going to get anything from that. So you want to make sure that if you are selling all of your rights to some distributor, that you're getting a good deal for it, because if the thing is popular, there is a chance that it can expand into different formats and different medias and things like that and make a lot more money in the long run. If it's not popular and you get a good deal up front, that's better for you, because then the distributor is the one who takes the loss, but you already got a good deal up front. So the ancillary rights exist by either depending on or being linked to the primary rights, which is why the merchandise, it would be based off of the characters in the movie. Think Star Wars, you have Boba Fett in there. They made a ton of Boba Fett action figures and posters and cups and mugs and Darth Vader and everything like that. So that stuff's all the ancillary rights based on Star Wars, the primary rights. And then the sequels are also ancillary rights that got bought by somebody else. Whereas the primary rights was the first one and it's still owned by 20th Century Fox. And so they still have their logo in the front. The sequels were sold to another company. I don't know which one, but now Disney owns them. And so Disney has their logo in the front. But the first one, the original one, the primary rights, is still owned by Fox in some extent. So they still have their logo on it at the beginning if you watch it, which we just did the other day. So if you wrote an original screenplay and copyrighted the script, or if you have gone ahead and filmed the movie, the screenplay and the film are the primary rights, the base. You own them unless you legally sell them to someone else or a company. You then also own all ancillary rights that come out of it. So for Star Wars, I said the action figures, the clothes, and other merchandise, the composition and the music, those are all ancillary rights. George Lucas put in his contract that he maintained all rights to merchandise and rights to any sequels with Fox when making Star Wars. He already had primary rights because he owned the rights to the screenplay, because he wrote it, or he had his wife help him write it, or however you want to say that happened. He owned the rights at the end of the day. But he was selling most of the rights to Fox for them to give him the funding to make the film. But because he owned the primary rights, he also owned the ancillary rights. And so instead of selling Fox everything, he was able to make out a deal to keep some of the ancillary rights, which were the sequels and the merchandise, or not the merchandise, but the action figures. I think it was that, right? Actually, no, he maintained all the rights to the merchandise. So that was all the merchandise. And back then, people didn't see that as lucrative of a thing as they do now. So it's really hard to get a deal where you get rights to the merchandise, because a lot of movies, a lot of companies make a lot of money, most of their money sometimes, off of like merchandising things, depending on what it is, if it's popular. So it's pretty hard to get rights to that now, but it is good to know and to think about those kinds of things before you just give them away to somebody else. You want to make sure you're getting something in return, whether it's more money up front or you get a percentage of anything of merchandise that sell and whatever else, something like that. You want to try to work out if you can. And you usually don't want to just sell away your rights to sequels or prequels to a distributor unless you're getting a really good distributor that is going to do right by the series at that point, because you don't want to just sell it to some third-party distributor that's only has a few films, but they're going to give you a pretty good deal, and then your film is successful and now they own the rights to any sequels that you make. So everything that you do from then on, you have to go through them, and it becomes another hurdle in the way of creating your next project that's based in that same world. So you want to keep all that stuff in mind whenever you are making any kind of distribution deal. But because George Lucas did that, he had all the rights to the sequels and everything. He ended up making a lot of money and got to keep control of the series by holding all the rights to the sequels. So he had control over where the story went and everything like that. Now he sold that to Disney, all of those rights, but the original rights still are maintained by Fox for the first film, the fourth, episode 4. So I don't know if I think they only have the rights to some. It's like something weird with it, but like they don't actually own the rights to it, but they have the rights to have their logo on it or something like that. Disney basically owns it, but there's some, I don't know, push and pull with that kind of thing. Not every intellectual property or IP is going to be as popular for merchandise and other things, though. So sometimes it's not as big of a deal to sell those rights for more money to distributors. So you really have to take into account if you think that if it would even make anything from merchandise. You know, certain movies they're not really made, like a romantic comedy. They're not really made. You can maybe sell some t-shirts and some cups if you have some specific lines in there, or like especially if somebody turns something into a meme, then sure, you can make some money off of some merchandise from some of the comments and dialogue in your script or in your film. But if it's a romantic comedy, it's really hard to like sell as much merchandise as you would from either like a fantasy or a sci-fi or something that has a bit more of a uniqueness to it. So you have to take that into account too. And decide for yourself if it's worth it or not to give those rights away. But it is always important to think about those rights and not just blanketly sell them away to a distributor without at least considering whether it's worth it or not. Some rights are going to be more profitable than others for certain films and franchises, especially with any sequels and prequel rights. If you sell those, someone else has the rights to future films. So if this one's successful, make sure the deal is good and good enough for you to offset the potential negative of someone having the rights to or fully owning the rights to any future stories told in that world. And many contracts in entertainment law deal with rights to percentages of profits from any ancillary materials like merchandise. So a distributor may take a percentage of the profits from all the merchandise sold, or in other agreements, they may have the rights and give you a percentage of the profits. Other agreements, they may just pay you to own 100% of all ancillary rights. So it really depends on what kind of contract and what deal you're going after. Some of them, they'll just take a percentage of all the profits for certain things. Some of them, they'll give you a percentage and basically own it. And the other one, they will fully pay for it, so they don't have to pay you anything after they give you the initial money. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to say about ancillary rights? Yeah, so if you heard that term, that's what that means. If you are making a distribution deal, you're going to hear that. And you need to make sure you're not just selling every single thing, because it is a lot of different things. So you can also break up the ancillary rights however you want. And again, those things can be based on region. It can be based on a certain duration of time. So fully selling everything, fully giving over all ancillary rights and all story rights shouldn't be something you do unless they're like fully paying for your film and or it's like a good distributor, or you made a good percentage deal out of it or something like that, because you could end up on the losing side of that deal by selling away all your rights if your thing is popular. The next thing we're talking about is one of the deliverables that you will get in a distribution deal for the most part, where they want you to give this to them before they give you the money, pretty much, or before they finalize the deal. They want to have these what are called deliverables, which means you give this to us, and if you deliver all this to us and the film in the way we want it, then our deal is complete, and we'll start doing whatever the deal entailed. So this is what's called a dialogue list, or also known as a dialogue script. And this comes from captioneasy.com, letter A in the syllabus. A dialogue list usually are one of the deliverables a distributor wants from you as part of a distribution deal. It is a time-coded transcription of a film or a TV show that is a great base for creating captions and subtitles for the product. So timestamp when in the film there is speaker identification, both on screen or off screen. So if somebody's talking off screen, you're saying who is talking. You can actually see it in this list. They're showing which character is speaking. And if they were off screen, they would do a little parentheses with an OS, showing that they are speaking, but you can't see them in the actual frame. But it does this, it does the time code for it. Each speaker identified when a new line of dialogue is spoken and whether it's from off screen or not. The time code timestamps have to be accurate, or subtitles and captions appear to be too early or too late. So they have to be during the duration that they come in and during the duration that they are there for. How long are they talking? Is it 2 seconds, 5 seconds? You need to make sure that the dialogue lines match up with the length that you get. All spoken dialogue is transcribed, including interruptions and pauses. So you can see pants, sighs, laughs, all of those things they're marking down. And if somebody interrupted, they would do like the little dash dash to show that somebody else is cutting them off. Or they would do the ellipses or dot, dot, dot to show that they are taking a brief moment of a pause, or they would just do in parentheses, pause. Basically, if you turn on your subtitles and you're watching a film, you'll see a lot of this stuff pop up, and it comes from something like this. This is where they get their information, especially if it's transcribed or it's dubbed or subtitled in another language. They need these kinds of things to do it. Any relevant sound effects are included, like sighing, coughing, and screaming. Other sounds like gunshot or a door opening can also be in there. Music and lyrics are encapsulated with little music symbol clef. So if there's any music happening, you'll have little like the clef and then the music, or the lyrics, whatever's being sung, and then the little music clef to. It's kind of like doing something in parentheses, but you do it in like little music clefs to show that music is that it's a song and it's not some dialogue. And there's also something called a CDSL, or a combined dialogue and spotting list. And that's where the dialogue list portion contains all of the dialogue and what we just talked about. And the spotting list portion contains the subtitles, when they begin, when they end, and their duration. So basically it's pretty much the same thing. They're used for the same stuff. You just add a bit more information into it. A dialogue list doesn't always have the start and end time. Sometimes it'll just have the duration. Whereas a spotting list will always have when it actually starts, when it ends, and also the duration, like how long it lasted. That way, the more information, the clearer it is that if there were any mistakes, it's clearer to see what happened, what went wrong. Instead of just having something where it's saying how long it was, you don't know when it started exactly or when it ends. So that's the kind of the difference there. They're basically the same thing. They have a lot of the same information, and they're used for subtitles, things like that, whenever you're putting a film onto any platform. Does anyone have any comments about that?
I had something, but I think you explained it pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, so that's going to be something that's used to create, obviously, subtitles or something else like similar to that for your film, whether it's in English or whether they're going to put it to another language.
They do. These automatic systems do suck, though. I don't know which one YouTube uses, but that one is complete garbage.
Right.
So,
well, this is something that you need to actually get done. I'm not sure if they make you do it by a company that they know does it well. That'll depend on the distributor. They might just want you to give it to them, which means someone in your crew or yourself has to actually listen to the entire film, timestamp every single line of dialogue, sound, and make a huge list of all the things like this. Or the distributor might say, we need you to get company ABC to do it because we trust them and we know that they do these really well. And they pay attention and get it all right. Because they don't want to have anything missing. They don't want to have anything out of sync either. They want the subtitles to appear and to go away when needed. So
yeah.
It's one of those things where you have to sometimes they'll let you do it. Sometimes they won't. It just depends on the distributor and how much they trust you, I guess. Next thing we're talking about is a continuity script. This comes from DCMP. It's letter A in the syllabus. This is another deliverable, and it's kind of on the same spot. This is even this one on screen is a combined continuity and spotting list. So the spotting list portion is the same as what we just talked about, but continuity list or continuity script is the new part. So they could ask for both of these. They could ask for a combined dialogue list and spotting list, dialogue and spotting list together, they could go ask for a combined continuity and spotting list, or they could ask for them all separately. It just depends on, again, the distributor and what they want. Continuity scripts are another deliverable for distribution deals. It is a script giving the complete action, scenes, and in detail in the order in which they are shown on screen. It includes sound effects, actors' accents, emotions, and other things. To write one, you have to write every word spoken, including the speaker ID, again, just like those other ones. You have to write every word, including uhs, ahs, ums. You have to write sound effects that happen, not every single one, but the ones that are important or would grab attention. So if there's like a background bird chirping, that doesn't really matter unless it's supposed to be like something to focus on. But every other thing that is meant to stand out is should be written down. You need to write lyrics if any music is sung. If nothing is sung, then include.
So basically, it's like a
information.
transcript of everything that is said or spoken in your film.
Yeah, I believe
Pretty
that
much.
these are used for the kind of like the audio description things. From what it sounds like to me, from what I understand anyways, the continuity scripts would be used as like the audio description. If you've ever turned on audio description in Netflix, it explains what is going on, who is getting ready to speak, and if they're angry or if they're sad, things like that. So these kinds of these continuity scripts would be there to help show that or help explain it. So for people who are deaf or for people who are blind, you know, these things are pretty similar in the way you fill them out for the most part, but this one just has a bit more detail because it's for people who can't see as well. So they're getting that audio description described to them of what is happening in the scene. Whereas the
It makes a
dialogue list,
huge difference. I can attest to that. It really does. Coda hates it. He's getting used to it. It's one of those things that can be kind of jarring in the beginning. I kind of hated it in the beginning too, but now even when I don't even think about it anymore, at a certain point, it's just, especially if you can't see facial expressions very well, and even if for understanding like context and stuff, even for people that can see everything, sometimes it really helps to give context to a look, for example, because they have that context of the story, so they will explain the look. You know how sometimes you're watching a movie and you're like, what does that look mean? I don't know if anyone else has this, it's just me, but like, is he mad? Is he curious? Is he like suspicious? I don't know if that would be a spoiler or not, but sometimes they will explain like, oh, he gives a suspicious glare or whatever. It makes
yeah, and they have
difference.
to do that to show like for people who can't see as well to hear what is happening and what is meant to be happening, even if the performance doesn't really give it off as well.
So that can be
like, I don't know what kind of face he's doing, but if the audio description people who are making this list, they're the ones who know what he's supposed to be doing, or she.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, was that
like,
supposed
that's
to
what
be?
that's supposed to be. But yeah, it's very similar to the continuity. I mean, sorry, to the dialogue list and the spotting list and things like that. They just have a bit of different information given out. This one you would have like, you know, John frowns, looks towards the shelf, looks back at Mark, and then says, well, I guess you wouldn't say that because
I would say, I do know that there are a lot of systems that you can either purchase or do automated that will do those subtitles for you. I will say though, if you want it to be accessible, if you want it to reach other communities as well, I would recommend, if you can afford it, or if you have the time, to take that extra time and look at it manually, or just double check to make sure everything's accurate. because sometimes it makes the most stupid mistakes and it makes absolutely no sense because it's an automated system and it hears, but it, it makes mistakes. And if you want it to be more accessible, that giving that extra step makes a huge difference, so.
Well, with the distributors, like depending on which one you're going with, they might have somebody just overview the documents you've given them. So they'll watch the film and just like kind of.
Yeah, but I've also heard
cross-check
of
it.
automated systems. That's
So
why I just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah, there are automated systems, but like you got to be careful with what you do. If you're hiring another company too, you want to make sure that they are at least checking over the automated thing, because some of them, especially on the cheaper side, if you're going like as cheap as you can for any company that's doing this stuff for you, it's usually because they're using automated systems, like you said, and they're just kind of doing that. And those things can have a lot of mess ups. Now, for this in particular, an automated system isn't going to really describe the emotion of the scene. So I don't know how many automated systems do continuity scripts. But for something like a dialogue list or a spotting list, they could probably fill in a lot of the information. So you definitely want to double check. I would cross check it. If you get sent to a company, they send it back, just kind of like glance over it. It's not as much work at that point. And you can just check and see if everything's good. But yeah, this stuff is used for either subtitling or for, continuity scripts are used for audio description mostly, or dubbing, whereas dialogue lists and spotting lists are used more for like subtitles and getting the subtitles in the right time slots so that they appear and disappear during when they should, basically when the person's talking. In a continuity script, you write the lyrics if any music is sung, just like the other ones. If nothing is sung, then you include information about the music. So you'd be like pop music by whoever wrote it, or depressing piano music if it's just like a composition you've done, when it happens. And so that way it's kind of just describing what is happening on screen. Use dashes for stutters and ellipses, or the 3 dots for stammering. Exclamation points to emphasize speech. You want to ensure there's correct spellings and names and all of the words. And like I said, these are used to help with dubbing and audio description services. Does anyone have any comments, questions, anything to add about continuity scripts? One thing I'll say is like there's a lot, like this is just some of the different deliverables that distributors require sometimes. So there are a lot, and it can either take a lot of time or it can start to cost quite a bit of money if you are hiring another company to do it. So you have to keep that in mind and try. That's another reason why you want a distribution budget before you start doing your film. You want to actually add that into your budget, because these things are all going to cost money, and it's going to be something that needs to be done to get it completely sold. So you want to try to have the money to be able to get it done, so you don't have to try to find money later just to be able to get the deal finalized if there's a distributor that's giving you some kind of deal. So something to keep in mind. The next thing is completion bonds. We've kind of gone over this, so I'll just touch on some of the stuff, retouch on it a bit, and then touch on anything that was new. This stuff comes from eqgroup.com. It is letter C in the syllabus. So completion bonds, we discussed completion bonds already. It's insurance for a bank that you'll complete the film and deliver it, or the completion guarantor company, the one who's selling the bond, will pay any losses the bank took if the film never gets completed, never gets delivered. If you get a pre-sale agreement from a distributor, both they and the bank are going to want a completion bond agreement so that they don't take on all the risk if the film doesn't end up getting complete. The strike price, or production price, is the price the producer believes they'll need for all expenses and the budget. So it's a price you're asking the bond company to guarantee or to cover. The completion guarantor will look over everything, which is like the budget, your experience level, and the experience level of your crew, who's attached, if there's any big names attached, or any known people, actors, crew members, things like that. They'll look at the script and more and take a risk assessment on if it's worth it or not, or if it's more likely you're not going to complete the film based on everything they've looked over. So they'll do a risk assessment and see like what's the track record of these people. You know, is this their first one? Have they done a few before? Did they complete it on time? Did they complete it within the budget? All of that stuff will be looked into. They'll require daily or weekly reports if they give you the bond. So you're going to be answering to them. You're going to be updating them on the progress as you go, if you're able to get one of these. They may do routine checkups to ensure production is running smoothly and try to help advise and guide if the film is behind schedule or over budget. And they may even attempt to find further funding in instances where you're getting ready to go over budget, because at that point, if they've already given you the guarantee, they absolutely want you to finish your film because they want to make back, they don't want to have to pay out the money to the companies because the film isn't going to get completed. So if you're getting close to being over budget, of course, that's a bad thing. You definitely don't want that. So don't try to get over budget. But if it ends up happening, sometimes these bond companies will try to go out and find funding themselves and help you, kind of like they're another producer or production crew member of some sort, someone advising and someone over the business side of things, because they're trying to get the film complete. They want it complete just as much as you do. The guarantee fee is normally expressed as a given percentage of direct production costs. So if you're saying that, you know, you need $1 million, they may say they get 2%. And so then they get like $20,000 right off the top just for giving you this guarantee. So you really get $980,000. So whenever a producer or a producer rep or whoever's trying to get this completion bond agreement, they need to keep in mind that there's going to be fees and that you don't get the entire amount, even if you have a completion guarantee that says you get $1 million, or they'll cover you for up to $1 million if you don't complete the film. That still doesn't mean that the face value is going to be exactly, I mean, the face value will be $1 million, but that doesn't mean you're actually going to get the full $1 million, because there's going to be fees that come out and stuff like that. So you got to keep that in mind. Whatever budget you need to ask for a little bit more. That way, whatever fee comes out of it, you actually get the budget that you need. Sometimes guarantors will charge an upfront fee and agree to rebate a portion of it to the producer if no claims are made. That's called a no claims rebate. So basically they'll make you pay, let's say $5,000 right up front, and they'll say, oh, we'll give you back $2,500 as long as, you know, there's no claims, which means if you actually do complete the film, then you'll get the $2,500 back, and you only have to give us $2,500 for the fee. And so that in that instance, it would be less of a cost for you at the end of the day, but you would have to pay up front instead of them taking out the money from the bond agreement right away. So it'd be like out of pocket instead of out of the budget that you get. The bond fee is usually around 3 to 5% of the total amount of the bond. So if it's $1 million, 3 to 5% would be $30,000 to $50,000. And you can do the math for anything else. 3 to 5% is the typical bond fee. So if a company is going to give you one of these completion bonds, they believe that you will actually do what you say and complete the film and deliver it to the distributor who gave you that pre-sale agreement and the bank gave you the money because you have the agreement from the distributor that you're going to get the money from them. And so now they both want that completion bond, and you bring it to the completion bond company, and they're taking on the risk, saying if he doesn't or she doesn't finish the film, we'll pay you back bank, and we'll pay you back expenses of whatever costs you've incurred, distributor. So if they believe that you're going to finish it and they give it to you, they're still going to take out some kind of fee, 3 to 5%, because they are doing you a favor pretty much. They're an insurance, you're taking out insurance against you not completing the film. That's pretty much what a completion bond is. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that? Or anything to add that we haven't talked about before?
Yeah, I think we've been covering a lot as far as insurance these past few weeks. So I think at this point, it's just covering like the extra little details here and there, would you say?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like the new information pretty much was just the fee amount and the no claims rebate. Everything else was kind of just a refresher on it. But a completion bond's always a really good thing. And they don't really take over your film unless you aren't talking to them and you're not taking any advice that they're giving you, because they've done it tons of times before and they can see when there's problems coming in and they want to know about the problems so they can try to help you get through them instead of you trying to shut them out because you're afraid they're going to try to take over your film, which sometimes can happen based on you not talking to them and you leaving, you just like running it yourself. Even if it's going into the ground, they're going to try to save it however they can. And because they're the ones that are taking all the risk of you not completing it and giving up the money up front, they have the rights to actually come in and take over your film if you're not going to be cooperative at all. They don't want to do that. They don't like doing that. They're business people. They aren't creatives. They know that if they were, they would be out there making the films themselves, but they're just the ones looking over the money. And so that's something we've already talked about, but I just thought I would touch on that again. The bond companies don't want to take over a film. They don't want to impose on the creative thinking of the crew and the cast and everybody else. They just want that thing complete so that they are not at risk of losing money because you didn't complete it. And a lot of productions can have a lot of problems and start to be in like a production hell where they're stuck and they're not getting anywhere. And there's a lot of issues and it's not really getting complete and people are quitting and this and that. So that is when they might step in and try to help or try to take over to salvage what they can, or just write it off as a loss if it's too hard to fix, pretty much. All right, minimum guarantees. This is something we've also talked about, also known as MGs or advances. MGs are money a distributor pays you up front for your film. You keep it regardless if the film fails or not. When revenue comes in, the distributor takes their fee, then the money out of any expenses they've incurred from like doing a trailer or doing any of those deliverables if they took it upon themselves to do it, and whatever other fees that they've incurred from all of this other stuff that they've done marketing wise and business wise. They take out their expenses from that. And then if they've given you a minimum guarantee, they recoup the money they gave you for that minimum guarantee, and any money left over, they then give to you. They still take out their distributor fee too. So they're giving you money up front, but they're going to recoup it because they believe that the film is going to make at least that much money or more. And so if their fee is 20 or 30%, they'll still take the 30%. Then they'll cover all their expenses first. And then whatever's left goes to the minimum guarantee amount. And then when that finally gets covered, if it's still making more money, that's when you'll start receiving some of the money after the fact. They all say minimum guarantees aren't offered as much as they used to be, though. So it's pretty hard to get because there's so many films out there now. There's so many people making movies that there's a lot of competition on the supply side, where the people who are making films, there's a lot more to choose from, and there's a lot more options for the distributors. So they have to limit their scope. And so they don't really worry about, I have to have this film, I'll give you this much money up front for it, as much as they used to, because they don't have to take on as much risk. There's so much competition on the other side that they can kind of just weed people out and do a better deal for themselves, because they know everyone's going to try to come to them to get their deal, their distribution deal, because there's so many. And with streaming services and things like that, sometimes they are or not as lucrative as they used to be. And those are all things that a distributor will take into account. Yeah, we've already talked about minimum guarantees. I just thought I'd bring it back up. Anybody have any questions, comments about that? All right, so next thing we're talking about is another deliverable that they're going to require no matter what. It's called chain of title. Chain of title. So this stuff comes from letter A in the syllabus. Chain of title for film. I think it's Alexi Ozas or something like that. Chain of title is another deliverable you'll need for distribution deals. It's a series of documents that proves legal ownership of the film. It shows how copyright has gone from one party to the next. You need it for financing or for distribution. And basically anyone connected to the story and film all the documents showing that they gave the rights to you. So next stuff comes from IndieWire.com. It is letter G in the syllabus. If the screenplay is adapted from a book, then there needs to be a clear contract agreement stating the rights to adapt it to a film. If a screenwriter wrote it and a producer made it, they need a contract that states they give the rights to the producer who now owns it. Any music agreements or composer agreements need to state that the music can be used in the film or belongs to the film. Talent release agreements. Crew need to be work for hire in their agreements. That way they don't have rights to whatever work they appear in. They worked for the money that you gave them on set. That's what they did with the comic book artists back in the days, made them work for hire so that way any comic book characters they created then belong to the company, not to the individual, because they're working for that company. So that is to protect you against them saying that they own the rights to whatever character they created out of the film. So whatever the actor character they were, you make them a work for hire, or the crew, they say that shot was mine, or this was mine, or that's mine. They can't do that because they were work for hire. And so that they were signing away whatever work they were doing on the production to the production itself. So the production are now the owners of all of those things that were created. It can get really complicated fast if a book writer gave the rights to make a screenplay for a film, only retaining rights to any sequels. Screenwriter adapts it, makes agreement with the producer that they have the rights to it for 2 years, and so on. So you can really limit the scope of the rights that are given. And so it's like the book writer says, you can have this movie, but any sequels or any sequel books still belong to me. Well, now the screenwriter only owns the rights to that one film that they're trying to make. And then the screenwriter, a producer comes to them and says, I really like that script. I'd like to make it into a film. And then the screenwriter goes, okay, you have the rights to it for this amount of time, 2 years. And if you don't make the film by then, or you're not in pre-production, then the rights revert back to me. And so because copyrights can be broken up into region, time, what kind of media it is, like if it's the rights to movies only, or games, or rights to both, like we said, ancillary rights and all that. Because of all that, it can get really complicated in who actually owns what rights to what. So really the original person who made it, whether it's the book author, if it's from a book, or it's a screenwriter, if it's from a script that's original, they own all the rights, and then they start selling those rights and dividing those rights and giving certain rights out to different people. Chain of title will tell you what documents are there, what contracts are there to show who owns the rights to what. Does this development company, the studio, or this production company, do they actually own the rights to this film, or do they only own it for, do they own it for everywhere, or do they only own it for America, first of all? Because maybe the book writer said, yeah, you get all the rights to my story in America, but nowhere else. And now that distributor that's trying to make a deal with the production company, they need to know that so that they're not trying to release it internationally and get a copyright claim. Because no, I never sold the rights to you to make a movie in Asia about it, or to distribute your film in Asia. I only said you could distribute it in America. So it starts to get really complicated, and that's why this thing is so big and long, and chain of title could be dozens of documents, but it's basically just all the contracts saying who owns the rights to what. It's imperative that you have clearly defined the rights given in each contract and the rights withheld. Or you could do some contracts that do any rights not expressly stated are reserved, meaning anything I don't specifically say you get in this contract means I own everything else. That way there's no confusion or gray area about, well, you never said I didn't own the rights to merchandise. So, those things can get very complicated very quickly, like I said, and it can convoluted as hell too. Also, be sure to get contracts from every single person for everything, ensuring you actually own the rights to the film. Everybody who's involved, you want some kind of contract with them, especially stating that they are work for hire and that they are giving the rights to you.
I would say, I would also say, make sure that the rights are theirs to give, because there have been a lot of cases of a production company owning the rights to a story that someone sold to them, but really those rights were like either bought or lended by someone else, and that third party is the one selling it to the production company. There have been a bunch of issues with that as well. Like, it's not their story to tell, or it's not their property. And later on, the company's the one that has to deal with that.
Yeah. And that is why a distributor wants to look at it. They want to check it out themselves and see it, if they believe that all of the rights are in order, and to know the scope of the rights that are given. Because like Priscilla just said, if I'm a production company and I just made a film based on someone else's screenplay that's actually based on someone else's book, and they gave me the rights, again, if they only gave me the rights for America, and I make the film and I'm trying to get a distribution deal, and I say, yeah, here's all the rights, and here's international rights, and I'm signing out everything. I don't have the rights to international rights. So if the distributor is not doing their homework and they don't look through this chain of title and see that, oh my gosh, he doesn't have international rights, then they might, do a deal that they wouldn't have otherwise, or they might give a better deal than they would have because they thought they were also getting the rights to international stuff. And then if they start making international stuff and they didn't look through this thing, all the documents and everything, then that's when it starts being a problem and can have a lot of copyright strikes against them and everything like that. So copyright claims.
Yeah, like
That is
there are
why
a
they
bunch of
require
issues.
this. That is why they like what is called a clean chain of title, where it's simple and it's easy, instead of one that gets a little more messy with a lot of restrictions and certain things in certain areas. And you can use it, but only this much, or you have to make a film every this amount of time, or there's plenty of deals like that. And it starts to get really difficult. It takes longer to understand what you actually own at the end of the day, if it's a lot more limited in those ways. It doesn't mean it's not going to sell, especially if it's a popular thing. I think like Spider-Man and them, they're all, I think the Sony still own it. They had like some deal where they
Yes.
own movie
So
rights
they
to
own
it.
but they
So
lended it to Disney. I believe that was kind of how it was. They lended it to Disney for a multi-movie contract. They could use Tom Holland for, I think they could use the Spider-Man property for, I think it was like a 5-movie contract or something like that. And it ended with Far From Home. And now I believe they're trying to renew it, if I'm not mistaken, or they're negotiating terms of renewal. But I also heard that Sony is asking for like a bigger payout because of how big Spider-Man was.
right, and they have the rights to the film because they made that deal with Marvel, even though Disney
But
owns
those
Marvel.
rights also have like conditions. For example, they have to make a movie, a Spider-Man movie every few years as well. So like, if they fail to meet their part of the contract, those rights can also be taken away.
Yeah, and that is why even though Disney owns the rights to Marvel, they don't own the rights to every single Marvel character because of those other rights that were sold to Sony years ago. And so when you're talking about Marvel,
And
you can't
Fox with
just
the
say,
X-Men
well,
that they bought.
Spider-Man belongs to Marvel, so we now own the rights to Marvel, because that was split into a different thing and sold off to a different, that ancillary right, under the umbrella of Marvel. Spider-Man would be like an ancillary right, and he was sold off to Sony to be able to make video games, movies, and I don't know if they do merchandise. I'm not sure.
Same thing with Fox.
That,
they just, when they bought Fox, they acquired the rights to the X-Men, but there was like one last movie that was on the X-Men umbrella, which was like the Dark Phoenix, which is why no one cared about it, and they just pushed it out there basically. But that's also why for the longest time Disney couldn't use the word mutants in the movies. So they had like the Inhumans and all of these other terms so that they could specifically not use the word mutants because they didn't have the right to the X-Men.
Yeah, so I mean, it's still sold. Obviously, it's a really popular IP, so obviously that's still going to be sold. It's still going to be made. But those are things that can start to
of it, yeah.
The complexities of it, and how you can infinitely split up the rights to different companies and different things, regions, timelines, durations, things like that. Like with that deal, they have to make it every so often with the different characters, or they lose the rights to the characters. And so that's why, I believe that's why they're doing like Morbius and all these other movies, because they're trying to maintain the rights to these other characters they own the rights to, even though they never really made anything with them beforehand. Because
that's also why they made another Spider-Man movie a few years ago. Like they reset the Spider. No, I'm talking about the Amazing Spider-Man. What was because their deal was about to expire and they had to make a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, so that just shows like how the scope of it can be limited, and it can be separated into different pieces and parts, and you could sell the rights to somebody for merchandise. Also, if you get like a really big actor, they might want a percentage of either profits or of merchandising profits or something like that. And so this chain of title with all of the contracts.
I was just going to say, it's also good to see how much, like if someone's like, oh, I'm selling you the rights to this property, to actually do your research and see how much of the parts of that property they actually own. Like if they haven't leased it out to anyone else, like leased specific characters or leased specific storylines, because if those are bought, then you can't use those. And so if you don't do your research, you might end up thinking, oh, I have this property now. And then you find out, oh, wait, this character that I really like and wanted to use is actually property of another company and I can't use it, even though I bought the rights to that IP. So yeah, that's another thing that you have to be really careful and do your research on, because they might try to do that as a way to like spreading it out and selling as much of that property as they can to multiple different companies.
Yeah. So any artwork, stock footage, still photos, and things like that that are used in the film also have to have clear rights to be able to use them. If you're getting it from a website, they usually have the agreement. It's either emailed to you or you can get it off their website most of the time. That shows that you actually have the rights because you were either subscribed to it or you bought it or whatever the case may be, depending on the site. But you have to show that that's, clearly you have the rights to use it so that they don't get a copyright claim on. If a filmmaker writes their own script and it is a sole owner of an LLC, you made a company for it, they still need to assign the rights to their company for the chain of title, because the company is treated as a separate legal entity. So even if you're the sole owner of a company, you created a company, that company is treated as a separate person. And so you need to say, if you wrote it, then I say, for my company, LCloud Productions, I give the rights to LCloud Productions to use this film as they see fit, blah, 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 and do a contract with myself pretty much, because it's my company. And so it's a separate person legally, but in reality, it's just me owning a different thing. There can't be any gaps in the chain of title, and every document needs to be signed by the people that the contract was written for. If there's any gaps, that's going to be a huge problem and probably won't get you distribution. Gaps would be like if you're missing a talent release form, or you're missing any kind of contract that links to you owning this actual thing, being able to distribute it and show the film places. So there can't be any gaps. That has to be locked down with all of these different contracts. I actually opened RodriguezLaw.com, talks about it a bit. Some of the things that can be included: copyright registration certificate or filing receipt. So if you copyrighted your script, that document, assignment agreement of the motion picture or the screenplay and concept adaptation, agreement or letter with copyright owner for the right to represent and to sell it, agreement with the distributor, agreement with the sales agent, option or purchase agreement for the screenplay if you purchased it from somebody else. If it's not an original screenplay, the acquisition agreement for the underlying literary material on which the screenplay is based. Like I said, if it's a book, then you got to get the rights to it. You got to have some kind of contract with the book author or whoever owns the rights to the book. Any life story rights agreements, if you're basing it off of somebody's life and you want to get their permission for it, depending on who they are, you might have to. Then you'd have to get that agreement. Talent and crew agreements, writer, director, producer, executive producer, everybody involved with the film, all of their agreements, all of their contracts you need to have. Location agreements and releases. That, of course, you can't show somebody's house or show somebody's private property unless you get that talent release or location release and the location agreement to show that they said you can use it in your film.
That book that I recommended to you guys also talks a lot about that, about the different release forms, contracts, negotiations, and that kind of thing. I really can't wait to actually sit down and read the whole thing, because it's
the pocket lawyer for filmmakers.
Yeah, something like that.
Any clearance agreements, artwork releases, logos, costumes, product release, film clip license. If you're using any stock footage, like we said, if you're using another film, some films have like a clip of a Christmas movie in their film because the family's at home watching a Christmas movie together. You're going to need some kind of copyright clearance agreement for that to be able to use it in your film. Any still photos, sounds, and any other intellectual property that is included visually or audibly.
Yeah, I was gonna
portions
say,
of the film.
even if you're not showing what film it is, but there's like a little clip, audio clip of the film, like a scene or whatever, you still have to get the copyright for that.
Mhm. Product placement agreements. If you do have a company that wants to give you some money to insert their product, they will have some kind of agreement with you saying that you are allowed and they want you to put their product in your shot. So if you want a Monster energy drink, if you have an agreement with them, then you have to have that agreement for this chain of title to show, yeah, Monster Energy said they want me to use their energy drink. I'm not just using it and going to get a copyright claim later. Music supervisor, music licenses. If you use anyone else's music, you have to either have the master use and synchronization license, or if you're just using the lyrics, or if you're just using the composition, you have to have all of those agreements. So depending on what part of the music you're using, you have to get different agreements to that. So that's something you'll need. Assignment of mortgage and copyright, a quit claim. So I actually looked up what a quit claim was. Quit claims, this comes from goldenwaymediafilms.com. Quit claims are if a screenwriter sold the option to use and buy the script to a producer or a production company. They worked with the writer to rewrite the screenplay, but were unable to raise funding for it, so the option to buy it expires. So what usually happens with people buying screenplays is they will do an option agreement where they say, we'll pay you this much money to get the option to fully buy it from you. But we want to see if there's any interest in it. We want to see if we can get any directors and actors, big names attached to see if we can make this thing for the amount of money we think it needs to be made for. So we really like your script, but we want to see if we can get funding for it. So we'll pay you, this amount of money to get the option to buy your script. And also you can't sell it to anyone else until this option agreement is expired. So they might do it for a year, 2 years. We have the option to buy it from you for the next year, the next 6 months, and we're going to see if we can raise funding. Now, the production company or the producer will help the writer rewrite it a lot of the times to get it better. They'll give notes and say, hey, can you change this? Can you update that? I don't like this piece of dialogue. I don't like this. I don't like that. This scene doesn't work. What can we do? And then they work with them to fix it. And so if the screenwriter doesn't get a quit claim, the producer or the company may be able to claim partial ownership. So then if they weren't able to raise the funding and the option expired and a new company comes in and they want to make it because the first company that tried to make it helped rewrite it and gave some notes and helped rewrite it. They helped get the screenplay where it is currently. Then they might be able to claim that they partially own it to the new company. And that can be a huge problem for the screenwriter. And so a quit claim reverts all rights back to the screenwriter if the first company doesn't make it. So basically, if the screenwriter really that's something the screenwriter needs to do if they're trying to get anything, any kind of option agreement. They need to get a quit claim that says any changes you help me make or any changes you guys make, doesn't matter. If you don't end up buying my screenplay, then I get all the rights back to myself. If they don't have that, then the company that helped rewrite it can say, well, we helped rewrite it, so your script wouldn't be the way it is now if we didn't help you get it better. And so now that this other company's making it and they've raised $1 million, we want some of that because part of that script belongs to us. We got it better for you. So yeah, that's what a quit claim is. And so any of those, if you did get that, or if your screenwriter did have something like that, that would be on this chain of title. Any special photographic, audio, and technical processes used, any deferments and contingent percentage points, participations granted or assigned to any third party. That's a deferred pay, meaning I'm not going to pay you until this makes money or until we're done making it, until we get the funding for it. Whatever that just means, we're not paying you up front. That could be a crew member or an actor. It means we will pay you, just not yet, or we will pay you, but only if we make this amount of money or something like that. That's what a deferred payment is. On independent films, it basically means you're volunteering, is what I've heard. But on larger films, they don't usually do it. But if they do, it means you'll probably most likely get paid later. Any financing agreements, including any equity investors or bank loan agreements, post-production facilities, including the laboratory and location for production company's final mix, any settlement agreements, releases, and waivers obtained from any third parties with respect to the screenplay. All of that crap's going to be in this chain of time. So it's just every single thing that has to do with it. You're getting all the rights to everything. And we're just showing what rights you actually have. And they want to see it because they want to make sure that when they buy it from you, they have the rights, or they at least want to understand what rights they have, because you can't just sell them rights that you don't actually have. And if you are, I mean, you can put it in the contract, but in reality, they don't have the rights just because you put it in the contract, because you don't have the rights. So that's why they require all of these documents in what is called a chain of title deliverable. And that is also why you always want to have contracts with everybody in your film, everybody involved, all the locations, sound, everything, because you want to make sure that at the end of the day, if you do get an option, if you do get a distribution deal, that you are actually able to sell it to them and get it distributed everywhere, so that you can maybe make some money or make your money back from what you spent already on it. Because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to get a distribution deal because you don't actually own the rights. There's a gap in your chain of title. You didn't have the actor sign a talent release form. Well, we can't show them on screen now unless you actually get it. And now that it's after the fact, they have way more leverage, and they may require you to give them a bunch of money, or you might not be able to get in contact with them again, whatever. But it's really hard to get stuff after the fact. So you always want to try to do all that stuff beforehand and keep track of all of the things and keep it all in order, organized, so that you can have this chain of title. And if you have a clean chain of title where you are the one who wrote it, you are the one who owns the production company, you're the director, that's a lot cleaner than you would have if you involved 3 to 4 people doing all the different things. So a distributor will like a clean chain of title. It's very simple and easy to see where the rights belong. The more it's split up, the more people are involved, the dirtier and messier that chain of title gets, and the harder it is to see what rights you own and also what rights the distributor will now own. Do you have any questions or comments about chain of title?
Yeah. So all this discussion about contracts, and it's annoying, but there are times, I guess you can you'd have to use your judgment to determine, whether or not you want to go through all that process. But just pay particular attention to just the fine print and reading. I had mentioned several months ago in my movie that there was an actress that wanted, certain rights to characters and, stuff like that to the film I'm working on. now looking back at it now, I'm kind of glad I didn't entertain that in a way. I just seen this interview from Vlad on Monique, the comedian, and Vlad he does all these internet interviews and stuff like that, controversial interviews and stuff like that. So he interviewed Monique, but he was saying that her and her husband, when they asked for the talent release form, before they did the interview, they submitted the talent release form for Monique to sign, and her husband and Monique, they said, we'll sign it tomorrow. We want to read it and get our lawyers to read it, but we'll sign it tomorrow, whatever. And they did the interview, and Vlad pretty much said that he doesn't really do this type of thing, but for some reason he just decided to go ahead and entertain that. And they did the interview, and then they went, and then Monique came back and sent they sent the talent release forms. It wasn't even a contract; it was a talent release form. And her lawyers were pretty much like they wanted exclusive rights to the footage for like a year. So like Vlad would be able to own the footage for a year, and then Monique would own it, and she could do whatever she wanted with it.
And that's what I say, like, especially as independent filmmakers, just knowing the basics so that you can see that, like, what is a reasonable request and what is completely unreasonable or ridiculous from someone, because some people think, oh, it's just the new talent that will not understand contracts and will ask for things that are comparatively reasonable. If I'm getting like a known actor or someone who's had a little more experience, I don't need to worry about that. I feel like you really shouldn't go into it that way, because most people don't understand contracts, or most people think, oh, I should have the right to this, right? And don't understand like the legality of it or the reasoning. And so just understanding what is considered reasonable, what is considered appropriate, also helps you seem more like a professional in a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, for her situation, she was coming off of she was getting blacklisted because of the whole Netflix things. So she was in a pinch where she needed the rights to footage and stuff like that so that she could make money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that too, like what's going on with this actor or this talent, are they do something shady? And as a result, Vlad didn't agree to it. He was like, yeah, I can't agree. Just like I said the same thing on my movie. It's like, I can't agree to that. And the result of it, because they shot the interview, was he couldn't post. It was like, nobody saw the interview. He couldn't post it. So it was just a waste of, you know what I mean? It was just a waste of time. So he has this legendary interview with this legendary comedian, but he'll never get to show it because she never signed the talent release form. Something that was supposed to be signed beforehand, and he kind of got screwed on the back.
Yeah, and I feel like there could be negotiations. Like, I feel like her reasoning for it, you can kind of understand, but also I feel like if the company could have sat down with her and explained, this is why you can't, or like this, I feel like it's also unprofessional on their part, because like you said, this should have been done beforehand, and they waited last minute to do it. And
it said like they were saying that, well, yeah, it is unprofessional on their part, but they were saying that, oh, we need to check it over, we'll get it to you tomorrow. And so
yeah, but they wasted time. They did a whole interview, and because they didn't do that ahead of time, now they're like, crap, we have footage that we spent time and money on that we're not going to be able to release, and she's not going, and no one's going to see it.
Well, that's
even if we do release it.
That is the trap. They're thinking like, oh, we gold them into doing the interview and then signing the release forms later. If we say no, then they have to just give us what we want. That's the setup. You know what I mean? So it's either not only that, but Vlad's stuff isn't that his interviews aren't they're long, but he doesn't put any effort into the lighting or anything like that. It wasn't like he wasted any money or anything. It's just the principle of it. That's if your livelihood is based on the content.
Yeah, and you still wasted time in the sense of like you could have been doing another project, you could have been focusing on something else in that sense.
And it seems like it's just this thing with her, and I'm not really picking on her, but it's just seems like it's like now there's the DL Hughley incident where they're both going back and forth. Her contract said that, his contract said this, and then just learning about the business through them, because she's like putting everybody on blast. She's, everybody but the promoter. That's the thing. People aren't blaming the promoter because DL's contract says this, her contract says that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the contract, the user agreement, and then there was something else, some other type of contract that she was saying wasn't valid or something like that. But yeah,
it is complicated because it should, like, that's the thing where you ask the question, you're like, well, who's at fault here? Is it the her people that should have explained this better to her? Is it the company? Well, obviously the company has some fault, but like at the end of the day, it's not a black and white issue to where, oh, this person's completely right and this person's completely wrong. Sometimes it's just misunderstanding contracts, or sometimes it's just both contracts are made up and they're not really individually tailored for the person. And because there's no negotiations or no lawyers or understanding of the contract, it's hard to negotiate or try to understand what's on it.
Yeah.
So I feel like so much goes into it.
Yeah, but that's why you always want to pay attention to the contracts, like Brian said. Like, you want to read the fine print, make sure that you agree to whatever actor, crew member, or company is giving you some kind of agreement or deal. You want to make sure that you read it, you understand what they're asking, what they're requiring, and what they get out of it. Because if
What you get out of it, yeah.
Because if Brian had given this actress that did like was an extra on the film, the short film, access to merchandise and sequels and whatever else, then if he makes a feature film out of it, if he gets some deal, a distributor goes, hey, I really like that idea, I'll help make a feature film, give you some funding for it. Then he has to go back through this actress, this extra that was in her set, and everything has to go through them, and the distributor is going to go, oh, wait, what? Your chain of title has an extra on your set that has rights to the merchandise?
And then if that extra doesn't have any knowledge of anything, she might be trying to get more money, or she might be trying to negotiate stuff that she doesn't understand. And that could also ruin his negotiations too, because like, oh, well, that other person that has the rights to it is asking for this and that, and I don't think they understand that, and that's another issue. So yeah, it's very complicated.
So I mean, like, you have to really pay attention to what is in the contract and what the language is. And if you don't understand the language, you really need to get an entertainment lawyer to look over it and make sure everything's good to go. So you understand.
But like we said last week, there are resources, there are books completely dedicated to explaining at least basic entertainment law, basic understanding of entertainment contracts, media contracts, stuff like that. So you can go into it at least with a basic understanding of what every word or what most words mean, or how to negotiate a contract, what are your rights and what are their rights.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to pay thousands of dollars for someone to explain those things to you anymore. Of course, negotiations are different, but like, there's a lot more resources now for us to understand the basics at least, and not be completely relying on other people or being like, oh, well, I'm just going to have good faith and hope that everything works out because I can't afford a lawyer.
Yeah. All right. Moving on from that, the last thing on our list of stuff to talk about is
V messaged something.
It's a deal memo, and the company needs to have their portion of the contract signed and sent to the other party as well to validate the agreement. The distributor will want that too. Yeah, so both parties sign the contracts. Anytime you're doing any kind of contract or deal, you or your company will be signing. Basically, you'll be signing in place of your company. Like a Lakota Lakota Cloud in place of LCloud Productions, or I sign for them. It's some specific wording, but if you look it up, you easily find it. And it's you just do that so that if I'm giving the rights to my company to do the rights of this film, and I'm signing off the contracts, I'm signing for the company. I'm not signing with my name anymore. I'm signing as me being part of the company. That way, if something crazy happens and it loses money, because that company is treated as a separate entity, none of the debt and anything that happens, none of that goes on me as an individual. It goes on my company, which means my company might go down, but that doesn't mean I go bankrupt. It just means my company does. And so that is why a lot of people will open up a separate company for each film they make. That way, if something happens like that, something crazy with any kind of bankruptcy stuff or any major debt, it'll go down on the company instead of on them. Now, if they keep doing that over and over again, they usually can't open another business. They usually can't get out the debt to even do anything anymore.
And people might even sue them for fraud at that point, because if it's done a lot and it can be proven.
Yeah, so like it can't be done on ending, but it can be done per movie, especially if you've successfully created it before, or you can do a production company like I do and attach the things to that and then just sign the documents from that. But each party will be signing. You'll be signing with them so that it's like we're both in agreement. We know what day it is. That's why you always have to sign the date. When was this signed? And then their signature, their name, your signature in place of your company or yourself if you're the one doing the film. All right, the last thing on our list is what's called a QC report, quality control report. This stuff comes from blackwater.digital. They are letter A in the syllabus under QC report. So this is another distributable needed by distributors in a deal. QC, or quality control, is a very thorough check of the final exported version of the content, whether it's a feature film, a trailer, or something like that. The final master that you have created. You give this to the QC people. Passing QC means the film meets the specs and requirements of broadcaster, distributors, sales agents, and festivals. There are multiple levels and types of QC. The most involved one is a 100% written QC, or also known as a mastering QC. It's an extremely thorough check of the video, audio, and master container like a digital file. Each stream is checked separately in passes. Once complete, you'll receive a detailed multi-page report outlining how your master is built, what issues exist with the video or audio, and calling out any mistakes or oversights that they see in your film. For the video, conversion or compression artifacting, so if there's any little weird splotches or something that appear on screen, or anything that's any artifacting, which just means like little things that aren't supposed to be there, specks, something shows up and it's like not supposed to be there, or it's just a very heavy noise or something like that. That'll be something that's marked as something you want to look at. If any equipment is in the shot, so if you accidentally got the boom pole in, or if you got a light stand or any kind of equipment that's not intentionally supposed to be in, they will mark that. Title or action safe issues. So title and action safe is every screen is different sizes, and you'll usually have what's called action safe, which shows you where you need to put a title so that it fits different formats. And so they'll check and see if the title is too far to the edge to where if it shows on a certain screen, it's going to cut off the top half. They need to make sure that it's at the right spot so that it shows up the same on every screen, whether the top little part is cut off or not. Also, if the action in your scene is in the right spot. If it's too close to the corner of the screen and you're doing a very different aspect ratio, they just check it to make sure it's going to work on each screen. And if not, they let you know, hey, you need to actually like move this down or add black bars or do something, because what's happening is too close to the edge and corner of the screen where it's not going to show on certain formats, certain like computers or TVs or phones or whatever. They'll mark any misspellings if there's any text on screen. If there's any misspellings in that. So the opening crawl for Star Wars, if one of those words had a misspelling, they would mark it. Mixed aspect ratios. So if you have 2 or more aspect ratios in your film, maybe you shot with different cameras and you were shooting at a different aspect ratio, they'll mark it saying that you have different aspect ratios. It might be intentional, might not, but they mark it just to make sure. If there's any logos or trademarks in your film, they're going to mark it. So anybody's wearing an outfit and it has a little logo on it, Nike shoes, and you're like, you see the little check mark. That was something they're going to mark as like, hey, you know, this is unless you don't, if you have the rights to it, it's fine. But if not, this is something you want to cover up or change or cut out. And then if there's any errors or data corruptions in the footage. For the audio, they'll mark anything that has any pops or ticks, any dropouts, anything that just goes silent when it's not supposed to. If it's not in sync with the video at any point, they'll mark it saying, you know, they're opening their mouth and they're saying the word, but it doesn't come out until 6 frames later or however much time is in between. If it's compliant, or if it has distortion or is too loud. So compliant would be broadcast has certain levels that they need the audio to go to without going over a certain point, or, you know, they allow certain things to be loud, but not others. Maybe dialogue can be up, and that broadcast has certain specifications. And distributors, sales agents, festivals, all of them have like pretty universal specifications for that kind of stuff for the most part. And that's why these QCs can kind of check for all of them. But it is something you have to keep in mind and make sure it's compliant, that it's not going to be too loud or too quiet on anyone's systems when they're playing it. The QC process in whole takes about 3 times the runtime per pass. So for a 90-minute film with stereo audio, it would need 2 passes, one for the audio, one for the video. And so then 2 passes times 3 times 90 minutes is about 9 hours total. So if you have a 90-minute film, it's going to be about 9 hours of them looking through it, making sure everything's good with the video and the audio. It takes about 3 times the runtime, so you just multiply that by 3 for each pass. Now, if you had like a 5.1 surround sound audio, they have to do multiple passes to listen to the different audio layers. Where it's stereo, they can kind of listen to that at the same time. For the surround sound, I think they might be 3 passes, I think, or 4. I don't really know exactly, but they listen to like the back speakers differently than they listen to the 2 front ones. High quality QCs are billed per hour, and it could cost about $50 to $150 per hour. So if you had that 90-minute film and it's going to take 99 hours, to complete, that'd be around $450 to $1,350 to get that quality control report. The website also warned if it's cheap and almost sounds too good to be true, it normally is. Many very cheap quality control labs do mostly automated quality control checks, or they just aren't as thorough. And so this is something that you really want to be thorough with to make sure it's all good to go, because otherwise the distributor won't pick it up. Especially with just like, logos and things, you don't want to get a copyright strike later on because the distributor believes that you're good to go. You got this quality control report and it says everything's good, but they didn't pay as much attention as they should have. They were using an automated system that was checking mainly for audio and for video clipping and stuff like that. And so they didn't notice that there's that Nike symbol in there, the logo. And so that could become a really big issue later on where Nike might sue. And then it's going to be a huge issue where, maybe for you, since you got the deal with the distributor, it's not that bad. But for later on, for the next project you want to try to do, it's going to be an issue. And it's going to be harder to get funding and everything like that because nobody's going to want to do a deal with you. You got this other distributor sued. So the ones that are more expensive, it's usually because they're actually manually looking through it. They might do an automated check and then they go through and do a manual check right after that, or they might just do a manual check. And those are usually a lot better than the ones that do automated only. From their service, they mark things 1 to 3 or as FYI. And this is from most of them, from what I've seen, is they basically do the exact same thing. They either mark it 1 through 3 or they mark it FYI. Where 1, if they mark it with a 1, it just means it's slight things that you could fix if possible, but it's not required. If they mark it as a 2, that means it's bordering on the line of being noticeable, and they strongly recommend fixing, but it's not really required. Some distributors may not pick it up if there are 2s or 2s in the quality control report though. So you really want to make sure you know what the distributor is going to require, and you can always ask them. If there's any 2s, do we have to go back and fix it? That kind of thing. If it's a 3, that's going to definitely impact viewing quality. Fixes are required, or the distributors are going to reject buying the film. And then the FYI is information purposes only and don't require correction. So that's just like FYI. I don't know an example, honestly, but that's just basically giving you a information that doesn't really have to do any fixing on. It's just like giving you information on one thing it could be is like, it gets louder here. It starts out quiet and gets loud, FYI. Pretty sure you knew that, but just going to tell you anyway, just in case you didn't notice. But you start out at this level and you go up to this level. It's not going above the level that it needs to be to distort, so you're all good. But just FYI, keep in mind that happens. So that could be like something that they write down and let you know, where it doesn't have to be fixed, but they're just letting you know in case you didn't notice before. After the fixes are made, so if they give it back to you and they have 1s, 2s, and 3s, and then you go back and you have to fix those issues some way or another. After the fixes are made, the new master that you make should be given to the QC lab for a quality control spot check, which is them checking the specific spots that they flagged earlier. So it doesn't cost as much as the full check because they're just going over those very specific moments to see if you fix them or not. And so it's much cheaper than the full check. Certain things that were flagged may be intentional. So if they are, you request the QC lab to downgrade the flag and mark it as intentional. They will, unless there is a technical problem with it. So if it's a technical issue, they're like, no, you have to fix this. But some things are actually intentional, like, obviously we're doing a film about making a movie. So if we see a light in the background, that's fine. that's actually intentional because we're making it look like it's a set, or we're going to reveal that it's a movie set later on, and we're giving that hint by showing a light stand, whatever that. So that would be like, this is intentionally there. So they marked it, but then they can say, okay, that was intentional, we'll mark it away then. Depending on where you plan to distribute, may determine the qualifications and requirements needed. The QC lab should ask where you plan to distribute so they know what to check for. That's like if you're trying to get it on a broadcast network, or if you are trying to get it into theaters. Where you're trying to distribute will determine what they need to check for, and like the audio levels and things like that, because they require different specs. Even though a lot are universal, I think some audio specs are a bit different for broadcast than for the rest, and video specs too as well. But if you're trying to get into theaters and on streaming services, those are usually using similar requirements, I believe. You also don't want to mark stuff as intentional if it's not, just because you don't want to have to go back and fix it because it's going to cost money. Because if it's actually not intentional and you say that it is, the distributor is going to look over this quality control report and look at it and see that you say it's intentional, but they're going to be like, why is that intentional? It has nothing to do with the film. And they're going to find out pretty much. And if they find out that you tried to bypass the quality control report to get basically like trying to cheat and get a good grade, then they're going to either not want to do business with you again, or they're going to reject your business right then and there and cancel the deal. So you want to try to fix it if you can. Ones and twos aren't as important. So if your distributor doesn't care about twos and they're like, oh, that's fine, we'll take it anyway, then you don't have to fix those. But if there's threes in your thing that need to be fixed, then that is something that you need to go back and try to correct. Because, well, you have to actually, if you want to get a distribution deal for threes, because that's like technical issues or really easy to spot things that's kind of ruining the film in a way. And so based on the level of how bad the thing is that they caught is going to be based on what you need to do to fix it. But yeah, some things you can mark as intentional, but most things, and if it's not intentional, don't say it is, because you'll get caught and they'll feel like they're being lied to and they won't want to do business with you again. So something to avoid. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add on QC or quality control reports? All right, so last thing I'm going to just say is what we're studying Monday. Monday, we're talking about design and research. So it's talking about all the research you need to do if you're trying to do production design. Some how to research history I put in there. It's kind of more on the school side, but it is something you really need to know. So if you're doing any kind of period piece, you need to make sure either you or your production designer knows how to accurately try to get the information instead of just believing the first source they come across.
How to vet it, basically.
Yeah, architecture and production design. That kind of goes in with the other thing, pretty much blends together. And then television, sitcom, formulas, and structure.
Oh, also reminder for the exercises.
Yep, so we have the two exercises. They're both due June 30th. And one of them is based on color. And the other one is based on the concept and ideation. So the ideation and the concept one, you either make a mood board or a lookbook where you come up with an idea, or if you already have an idea in your head for something, start to pick out things that resemble what you're going for. Locations, costumes, lines of dialogue, anything that really like displays the idea and gives the feeling, the mood, the vibe of the thing you're going for. You can also do concept art if you'd like, or you can do a mixture of all three. But that's what that exercise is. It's just displaying a mood board, a lookbook, or some concept art, or all three, or a combination of one of those or two of those to show visually the idea that you have in your head, so it's easier for others to comprehend what you are talking about. When you say, oh yeah, it's a space opera, they're in a 2 ships. Like, well, what do those ships look like? What does space look like in your film? Is it colorful or is it dark and empty? What kind of space are we talking? There's different things you can do. So what do you have in mind? I want to see it. And that's the thing.
You
have to
can
do with
use
production
any
design.
kind of mood board app. Like you can use Pinterest. You can use, like there's a bunch of mood board apps out there that can make it a lot easier, so you don't have to make it off of like an editing software or
I
something.
heard Go Mood Board is a free one for the desktop version. There's also an app, but the app actually costs money. And then there's Pinterest, which is free if you just sign up for it. And those are the best digital ones. You can also print out things and actually make a physical one on like a cork board. But that's just up to you. And then the color exercise is taking a photo or making a small clip using production design, mainly specifically color, to help illustrate the emotion and the feeling of that scene. So that could be, you want to make it happy and bright and sunny, then you can do whatever colors that help illustrate that. You can also take out color from the thing, make it more blacks and dark browns and stuff to make it less colorful. Or you can add opposite colors, cold colors, and things like that to give us different emotion. So something, whatever you're going for, you're using production design to try to help illustrate the emotion. I think that's everything.
I think so, yeah, for now.
I'm gonna stop the recording.